The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Transitioning Toward Effective Resource Management. My name is Casella with Casella Resource Solutions, and I will be your moderator for the webinar today. Greener U has developed this webinar series to allow for us to share knowledge and best practice on college campuses. We are hosting this webinar over the computer to ensure that we keep order. We have everybody muted. However, we do want to address all of your questions. In order to ask questions, please type your questions into the question box at any point during the presentation, and we will do our best to address them at the end. We are hoping to end these presentations by 12:45 so that we leave enough time to answer your questions. A recording of the webinar will be made available online within a week. Please follow Greener U on Twitter or LinkedIn to know when the content is posted. Our speakers joining us today are Spring Buck, who is the R5 Operations Manager at Cornell University, Erica Spiegel, the Assistant to the Director of Physical Plant for the University of Vermont, and Andy Treby, representing Skidmore College and on the Casella Resource Solutions team. Again, I'm Liza Casella with Casella Resource Solutions and your moderator for today. I will I'll go through the agenda. So we'll talk a little bit about Casella's approach and who we are to start the presentations. We'll go through the challenges of effective resource management and implementation, and then we'll jump right into the presentations by our three universities. So to give you a little bit of background on Casella, Casella was founded in 1975 and is a vertically integrated resource management organization based right here in the Northeast and serving colleges and universities throughout the region. We are oriented to create systems to transform discarded byproducts and turn them into valuable industrial feedstock and sources of renewable energy. We own and operate integrated resource management infrastructure here in the Northeast, as you see by the images on these slides. Ultimately, we leverage our experience and partnerships to help organizations drive out waste and cost. So what is resource management? Many of us have heard this term often, and we want to kind of clarify what it actually means. Resource management is a strategic alternative to traditional waste management contracting and has been around since the late 90s. In fact, the term was coined by General Motors. General Motors redefined their disposal contract to provide a systems approach to resource efficiency that motivates cost reduction and conservation of resources. The EPA and many state governments, including the Mass DEP, have endorsed resource management as best practice for contract management. This next slide shows you a case study of the implementations and impacts of resource management at a General Motors plant. This, General Motors went from managing multiple contracts to a single resource management contract, which in turn reduced transaction costs and allowed them to focus on their core competence. As you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, you see multiple contracts prior to implementing resource management and the results after implementing resource management. So why does this work in industry? Industry has systems and processes in place, like lean manufacturing, enterprise-wide, which are oriented to driving out waste in all forms. They have a profit imperative to reduce waste and cost because the ultimate goal is to push out product. So why does resource management make sense on a college campus? In an era where institutions are needing to be more cost-conscious on one hand, while meeting the social and environmental demands of their students and stakeholders, resource management practice is a driver to both of these demands. Colleges and universities are ripe for this application, but are challenged by the complex nature of their procurement systems and the many systems that exist for managing materials and contracts, as captured in the picture on this slide. The future of resource management. I have the good fortune of presenting three very knowledgeable professionals from different institutions today who will be speaking about varying elements of RM practices, from contract management innovations and strategic partnerships to performance-based contracts that drive innovative diversion by aligning incentives. With that, I will turn the mic over to our first presenter, Spring Buck. Spring joins us from Cornell University, where she is the manager of Cornell's R5 operations. Cornell University is a private institution and a member of the Ivy League, located in upstate New York in the beautiful town of Ithaca. Cornell enrolls over 20,000 students each year. Spring?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Spring, and I manage the R5 Operations Department here at Cornell. Our 5 R's stand for Respect, Rethink, Reduce, Reuse, Recycle. We were formed in 2010 by joining together 4 recycling staff members from our grounds department, 2 staff from our maintenance management department, and myself. I came over from a history with transportation services here at Cornell. My 2 topics I'm going to discuss with you today are to talk about our transition from dual stream recycling to single stream recycling and our surplus reuse program that we started about 1.5 years ago. Our single stream recycling program began in 1988 and has had long-standing success. In 2010, with the formation of our department, we infused new energy into the recycling effort. This energy came from a number of areas which I will share with you as this presentation goes on. The first large project we focused on was changing the recycling collection to single stream. Making this change to single stream is best explained by sharing with you the partners we've had in the process. First, our county recycling program converted from dual stream to single stream recycling, and we made this change simultaneously. This was a great success as it allows for cross-marketing, reduction of customer confusion as they move throughout the community, and we in the county were able to learn together, sharing FAQs, best practices, and really growing our teamwork as we move through this process. Our partnerships also include our vendor, Casella. Casella is both a vendor for our campus and our county. Casella team helped brainstorm needed dumpster changes, sharing benchmarking of other institutions they've worked with, provided tips on marketing, and truly has been a partner in our process. Of course, we couldn't do any of these changes without our building care custodial team. We have over 300 building care staff on this campus, and they really are the champions in making the transition. Building care managers provided time for me to meet and train every staff member face-to-face in small groups. They took on the task of relabeling over 20,000 recycle bins with new single-stream recycle labels. They inventoried where added bins were needed, helped field customer questions, and provide feedback on the program. Of course, partnerships also include Cornell Dining and Cornell Catering. With over 30 dining locations on our campus, there was a great deal of work to do in updating marketing materials, updating back-of-house operations, and the student employees who help educate about composting on the Cornell's campus also took on the task of helping educate customers in the dining halls on proper single-stream recycling. Our grounds department and student assembly worked with us on updating outdoor waste bins and ensuring bins were paired across campus. And of course, our sustainability department has been a huge champion, especially through support with outreach and education. Partnerships include student orientations, newsletters, social media, websites, staff trainings, Recyclemania, of course, and now the Sustainability Office has kicked off the Green Office's Green Lab certification program. They also organize our President's Sustainable Campus Committee, which helps us network and provides us with a waste-focused team, bridging faculty, students, and staff on this topic. And of course, our building coordinators are truly a partner. They field customer questions, send feedback, do postering, update specialty bins, and day-to-day help ensure that our waste stream is properly handled. I'm also very honored that our Vice President of Facility Services, Q Wang, is truly our leader and supporter in these efforts. And there's no question that the list can go on and on. Departments campus-wide, students, clubs, outdoor education, communication, everyone's really pitched in to help ensure that the message is gotten out and keeps getting out with ever turnover. We've learned a lot of lessons along the way. We have learned that the single stream really did improve our diversion, and we have also learned that our county and the Casella system for sorting has been ensuring good quality materials, and single stream is working in our region. Diversion is up, not just from single stream, but also due to the conversation single stream and the education and marketing has created, overall awareness about a variety of recycled streams has gone up. And truly it has been about our partnership. But I'd also like to talk not just about waste diversion, but also waste reduction. So one of those topics that we can talk about there is about reuse. And since our department was formed in 2010, there's been a great deal of feedback around disposed surplus from campus, interest from community members in donations for not-for-profits, overarching sustainability goals, and really a need for material by our campus departments. Many departments need material, but they don't necessarily have the funding to buy new furniture. So the real blessing in disguise, actually, to help us get going, came from the audit department, where concerns were raised over the value of materials and who decides the value of materials, and a variety of concerns related to release of materials. So we developed Stacks. And Stacks is a system for trade and auction of Cornell surplus. It focuses only on non-capital items. Those are items less than $5,000. And what we do is we put them available to campus departments and facilities for no charge for about a month. And if nobody wants them after a month, we auction them publicly. Without using our website, we also do donate to not-for-profit organizations in our area. So to get this program off the ground, we built it right into our R5 operations department. Labor takes up about 25% of one FTE. Our physical space is very limited. We use about 1,000 square feet, and we're pushing our boundaries there. So turnover and getting material to come in and go out is key to the success. And just like converting to single stream, our partnerships are really what has made this work. I can't say enough about the support from the council's office. They were truly our first partner in this effort, working with us to make sure that what we were looking at was legal, that our terms and conditions were good, that our disclaimers were good, and that we were starting off on really solid ground. We also worked right away with our facilities, finance, and accounting partners, ensuring that we were collecting sales taxes properly, that sales tax was getting paid to the state, and helping ensure that we were tracking all the metrics we needed to. Trades crews, the people out there touching the material, bringing it in, really saying, hey, before I throw this into a scrap metal dumpster or into a construction demolition dumpster, maybe somebody would want this. They've really been champions of helping keep an eye out and find material for us to repurpose. Project managers have already gotten on board in some pretty big ways, not only alerting us to upcoming projects where material will be available, but also as they're planning projects, looking for reused material that may be available in the future. We had one really fun success where one of our IT offices was moving into a new building, new to them building, and we were able to provide them with new desks, new to them desks that were coming from the admissions office. They were actually able to cancel a $30,000 furniture order. Risk management has also been a great partner. They've helped review our program, review our decision tree, and help provide a stamp of approval on safety to make sure that our customers are comfortable with our program. Government and community relations was also a huge and very important contributor. They are responsible on campus for donating items to our community and beyond. They work with us to ensure that our tracking and donation processes meet their needs, and also help us network so that we could find homes for items in our community. Public Surplus is the name of the company that hosts our website, and they are specifically set up for government organizations and colleges. This was very useful, as since many other colleges have used them already, they had already problem solved a number of the details we had to make sure that we were compliant with. They are PCI compliant, and what they do is they host the auction, they collect the funds, they send us a monthly check. We then forward on the sales tax to the state, and there is no charge to us for this service. they charge a small fee to each customer when they are bidding. So our results and lessons learned from this is that if you build it, they will come. The program has been very popular. People really are enjoying it. It really is a positive engagement effort. And this program is filling a gap in reuse for low value and small quantity items. We do have other reuse programs on campus, but we didn't have any that met this type of item's need. So what we did find too, our end results were that we didn't really save a lot of money. Salary and space use really negate any income or avoided waste costs. But we do have a big financial win in avoided purchases by departments where they're able to get a table, a chair, and a variety of other items on campus at no cost. We're also very happy that after our first full year, we diverted over 56 tons of material from the waste stream. It's been a really fun project and has also provided a lot of opportunities for community engagement and education and conversation. Thank you very much for having me with you today.
Thanks, Spring. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Erica Spiegel from the University of Vermont. Erica serves as the assistant to the director of physical plant. The University of Vermont is located in Burlington and overlooks Lake Champlain. For those of you who still have some vacation time left, I encourage you to get up there now. It's nearing the end of foliage season, and it's beautiful. The University of Vermont is a public research institution and enrolls over 12,000 students each year. And with that, Erica, take us away.
Thank you, Liza. Glad to be here. So UVM has had a pretty successful recycling and organics diversion program for going on 25 years now. There were many drivers for this success, which in some ways made my job a bit easier as a solid waste manager. So Philip, if you can go to the first slide. Our basic program overview, we have a small crew that operates out of our physical plant department. There's a program supervisor, 3 frontline workers, and some student helpers. We contract out all of our rubbish collection and our organics collection, but we self-haul about half of our recyclables and contract out the rest. So it's sort of a hybrid approach. Our current landfill diversion rate is 44%, and I'm going to talk more about that metric later on. So how did we get here? Well, some of the key drivers were high landfill costs in Vermont. Our MSW contract is structured in a way it might not technically be considered resource management, but in my opinion, it is a win-win situation. The university pays a flat collection fee each month, basically for the truck and the driver, because the hauler has fixed costs that they have to cover. And then the university is then charged a pass-through cost for the actual waste tipped at the transfer station. So we really are only paying for the waste tonnage that we generate, so it does result in a real cost avoidance that we see in our monthly trash bill. We've also partnered with the hauler to analyze our routes, modify the schedules, sizes of containers. We've installed compactors in some locations around the laboratory buildings, basically to achieve more efficiency in the collection end, to the point where 10 years ago we had 6-day-a-week collection on campus, including Saturday service, and today we only have 4-day-a-week trash collection service. So it's also cut down on trucking. Other drivers, there's a strong environmental ethic on the campus and in the community. Kind of goes without saying, when people think about Vermont, they think green and sustainability. So it really was not difficult to push the concept of recycling and composting here. There's been a lot of public and private support for infrastructure in the past couple of decades. We are the home state of Casella, and I think they were a big driver in a lot of the statewide infrastructure we have. Our local municipal solid waste district owns a single stream MRF that's privately operated. They've also invested a lot of public money in composting facility. They provide programs for hard to recycle items. So really, a lot of that stuff's been there, done that. Lastly, to capture the final amount, the state enacted a universal recycling law, which is like a mandatory diversion for recycling and composting. So these conditions were always right all along, low-hanging fruit has been picked. So then we get to the, well, that was easy. Now what do we do? So we're getting to this phase where we need a real shift in our thinking about waste management, because we don't necessarily want to recycle and compost more. We want to waste less. And it is a slightly different concept to get your head around. A lot of people call it zero waste. But whatever you call it, it's not necessarily increasing recycling so much as wasting less. So there's a lot of challenges to do this in an institutional setting. First of all, true cost. Who's paying for this? On most campuses, the general fund picks up the tab for waste disposal. Individual departments, academic, administrative units, they don't get a monthly trash bill. And certainly individuals, students, staff, faculty, they don't get to see the cost either. And working within the facilities department, I know that the trash cost is relatively small when compared to other really expensive things the university has to pay out for. Energy cost, healthcare costs for employees. Those are really big things that people are looking at. So it's kind of hard to say, hey, let's try to reduce our trash costs even further. As a recycling manager, you don't have any say over what's purchased upstream. When departments are buying stuff, they typically don't think, how am I going to dispose of this when I'm done with it? They just go out and buy it, and then years later, you'll get the call, oh, we have this equipment, or we have this weird kind of packaging, how do we get rid of it? And then lastly, there's a lot of different departments involved. Spring already talked a lot about the importance of partnerships. How do you involve the other departments who control the other aspects of campus operations? Because remember, reducing waste is your priority, but it might not be theirs. So how do you link those objectives? For example, we have a separate conference and events services, event setup crew for many years. If folks wanted recycling and composting, they had to request it as a separate service. We had a separate truck, a separate crew that went over and set that up. But years ago, we said, well, this is nonsense. It doesn't make sense. Make it part of the standard package of services. So now conference and events handles all the recycling and composting for those events. The types of skills needed to do these programs are different than the ones we might have used to implement recycling in the first place. Figuring out collection logistics, types of equipment, sorting technology at the MRF, those are all technical aspects of the process which seem a lot less relevant today. So as a recycling manager, you're more of a persuader, a collaborator, a negotiator, figuring out, what makes those other departments tick, how do you build relationships so that you're all working towards the common goal of wasting less. Okay, so enough about that organizational philosophy. Let me give you some specific examples of waste reduction programs we've been able to implement. The first three examples are in UVM dining. I should mention that Sodexo has been our long-term dining service contractor, and we have a really excellent relationship with them. They've always been willing to try and test new initiatives. None of these things happen quickly or overnight. It always takes careful thought, testing, vetting it through a lot of different stakeholders. So first is our EcoWare reusable takeout program. We do have 3 residential unlimited dining halls on campus that use all washable plates. But in the retail locations, customers have the option of getting their food in a sturdy container. The containers are then returned to the dining area for proper washing, and in exchange, the student or the customer gets a tag. It's literally a cow tag. Because we had to put that Vermont spin on it, it's the little tag that hangs on the ear of a cow at a farm. So it's funny because students are like, hey, do you have a cow tag? And everyone sort of knows what that means. The students opt into the program initially with a small fee, but then they recoup the fee over the semester by getting a discount every time they use their reusable takeout. So since the program got started, we've avoided over 57,000 single-use takeout boxes. Tray-free dining. not necessarily unique to UVM, as many campuses have done this. But many years ago, when I asked dining if they'd consider removing the trays, their response was, yeah, let's consider it. Let's test it out. And that's what we did. So we worked with a nutrition and food science class. They measured the post-consumer food waste for a full week, made observations about consumer behavior, people's habits in taking food, putting it on their tray. Then we took the trays away. We measured again, did customer surveys, and they found that up to 30% less food was wasted once the trays were removed. So armed with this data, if you will, we went back to the dining management, and they said, less wasted food means less food purchased, so savings on their part. And we also looked at the cost in the avoided cost in not washing the trays. So now it's just become standard. There are no trays in the unlimited dining. Lastly, Sodexo invested in this Lean Path scale system. Some of you may have already heard of Lean Path. It's basically a small scale with a smart screen interface. It requires the kitchen worker to code or record the reason why the food was being discarded. So all waste, all food waste, is categorized with a specific reason. Why did you throw out this food? And there are 8 categories. For example, overproduction means we made too much food. Trim waste, it's obvious. This is the part of the food or the lettuce that you can't eat. Spoiled is another code. Maybe food was not kept at the right temperature and then they had to throw it away. Expired is another category. Maybe we grabbed something out of the cooler, it's past the expiration date, we can't legally serve it. So the result has been that the staff are much more aware of not only how much food they're wasting in the kitchen, but the reason why. And then they've been able to adjust their cooking patterns. Hey, let's not make as much soup late in the day because it doesn't get, used. They're adjusting their menus and portion sizes and also changing the way they order certain products. Okay, so aside from the dining areas, a few other waste reduction examples. Probably the single biggest paradigm shift we've had on the campus was several years back when the custodial services department eliminated desk-side collection of trash. Now, I would be lying to tell you that this was entirely about waste reduction. We framed the change as a waste reduction program, but the real driver for this was a budget cut that the custodial department was facing. And they were basically told, cut your operating budget or cut your staff. And they didn't want to cut their staff, so they said, okay, how can we cut some of our supply budget? Let's not buy all of those small plastic liners that people use in their trash cans near their desk. And we did the math with the custodial department, and it was upwards of 9 tons a year of just plastic bag waste. So this is not the waste that was in the bag, it was the plastic liners themselves. And so what this did was, by eliminating desk-side collection of trash, for the custodial department, it freed up their time so they could spend more time on more high visibility cleaning tasks, and then they were able to take certain things that they used to contract out and bring them back in-house. So they basically restructured how the custodians were spending their time. Less time checking everyone's trash can every day and more time on more high visibility cleaning tasks. But really what it resulted in was it made all the staff and faculty really aware of what they're putting in their trash can. There was no, trash garbage fairy that came every night to make it go away. They had to be confronted with their own trash, basically. We've also been better at designing for not wasting. We have really good collaboration with our architectural team. They design for recycling and composting. They also, usually this includes like built-in cabinets for sorting multiple materials, better signage for the areas, better staging areas at the loading dock for reusable items that are backhauled to vendors. So just a lot of times it's just asking for more space to stage stuff. So these are some examples of things we do. But how do we know our efforts are really making a difference? Well, we need to measure our waste stream, because really, if you're not measuring it, how do you know it's working? So like many campuses, we have a methodology for keeping track of this. We receive actual tonnage data on most of our materials. Some of the items are measured in cubic yards, which we then convert to tonnage using a density factor for that particular material. Plug the numbers in a simple Excel spreadsheet, and then you get your bottom line, your diversion rate. So diversion rate really, which everyone loves to talk about, it's only telling us the proportion of stuff going to the landfill versus the proportion of stuff not going to the landfill. It's a fine metric if you're really trying to recycle more and compost more. But as I said earlier, we're really looking to waste less. And sometimes wasting less actually means making less recyclables, making less compostables. So the metric that I really find more meaning in is normalizing that data using either per capita or per square foot in the denominator. So a couple of years ago, I started playing with this metric, saying, you know, this is really the story that I like to tell people. So if you look at the chart, you could see how it plays out. Here's where we use pounds per student. Our student body has increased over the decade, and those numbers are readily available from our admissions office. So the red line is pounds per student landfilled, and the blue line is pounds per student recycled and composted. So the difference between those two, that's the proportion. So that's your diversion rate, right? That's sort of the relative difference, recycled versus not recycled. But what I'm really interested in is the green line, which is the sum of both, meaning all the stuff that's generated, which is inclusive of recyclables, compostables. And the trend has been consistently for almost a decade, a reduction in overall waste generation. So while our recycling numbers may be flat, and people might say, oh, well, why aren't you recycling more? Well, my goal isn't to recycle more. My goal is to waste less. So to me, this is the most meaningful metric. It's the one I care about the most, because it's really showing your waste generation rate is truly going down each year. And when I plug the denominator in as square footage, we get a similar result. So that's really all I wanted to share with you today, and I'd be glad to answer questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Our final presenter today is Andy Treby, who joins us from Casella Resource Solutions. And Andy will be speaking on behalf of Skidmore College. Skidmore College is a small, private, liberal arts institution located in Saratoga Springs, New York, and enrolls over 2,500 students each year. Andy? Andy, are you there? Okay. Well, we can start with going through the slides. I can take some of the role on going through the slides for Andy here until he checks back in. We may have some technical difficulties. So again, we Casella are going to be presenting on behalf of Skidmore College. Oh, great. Perfect.
Liza, I'm so sorry. I had my I didn't realize my phone was muted. Okay, so sorry about that. So Skidmore asked me to speak today because they had a prior engagement. So the challenge, and if you can go to the next slide, in early 2013, Skidmore is a private institution with 2,500 students and 1,100 employees. Their initial diversion rate was around 20%, and they had established a 40% recycling rate by the end of 2014. The relationship with the hauler was really a traditional relationship, back of house, little engagement with the service provider to develop and implement any kind of holistic programs. So what the solution was, if you go to the next slide. So what the solution was that the service provider spent time with all of the stakeholders to become really familiar with the institution. Now, what that meant was identifying who the stakeholders were early, meeting very often, and understanding the goals, pain points, what's working, what isn't working. So then Skidmore entered into a performance-based resource management contract agreement with incentives that align for both Skidmore and the service provider. The next step was to deploy zero-sort recycling around campus. This was done with comprehensive training of staff, monthly reports of activities tied to baseline diversion, and I'll get into the diversion and what all that means, the baseline, in a few minutes. Recycling audits, we did recycling audits on-site and off-site. We actually had employees that, Casella employees and Skidmore employees that were pulling trash to help develop that baseline. And then relaunched the program through rebranding, through custom design and co-branded signage. So we look at the conflicting incentives. If you look on the left, service providers want increase in service, generators want decrease in service. The fee driver there is volume for the service providers. You know, so it's not aligned. So when we look at a resource management program, and we set this up for a win-win for the customer and for the generator, basically what we're doing is we're aligning both of the goals together. So the service provider wants an increase in service, the generator wants an increase in service, the fee driver is value. Okay, so you know, basically what's good for Skidmore is also good for the service provider or Casella. So let me talk a little bit about the gain share. Okay, so you know, basically what we started off with was a 20% diversion. So it was really important to develop a mutual baseline. So what we did is we normalized the baseline. We took out event work, C&D, project work, stuff like that, just to have a normal baseline. Like Erica said, it was, you know, you want to try to make it something that's very meaningful. We took the volume of that baseline, divided it by the cost to come up with a baseline cost per ton. And what we did is we looked at a diversion rate split, a gain share split, depending on the improvement over the current baseline. So here's what Skidmore proposed, and this is what we're doing right now. So any increase from that baseline, there's a split between the client, Skidmore, and the contractor, Casella. So in the event, if we increase the diversion factors by the baseline plus 10%, we would be looking at a 50-50 gain share on the savings. Now the savings are driven from cost avoidance from disposal. In the Fort Edward market, in the Skidmore market, disposal is around $60 a ton, and recycling around $10. So we start out with 80% of volume going to MSW, okay, and 20% going to recycling. If we can just change that dynamic and get it to a 50-50, a 60-40, you can see where the savings are driven from. That takes us to some of the results. So right now, we've been able to increase the recycling rate to 33% over prior year, with 40% monthly recycling rates in May and June. August looks like they're close around the 38%. So you know, they've done a really stellar job of being able to increase the recycling. We were able to properly capture and divert all the increased volumes through move-in and move-out periods. We did that with signage, with clear marked out areas for recycling. The staff was trained, so when kids drop all the stuff off by the dumpsters, the staff were actually able to segregate and put into the appropriate container. The other thing is that we have quarterly meetings and routine site visits and reviews for constant improvement, and you know, that's something that goes on every single quarter. And because we're in a gain share model, both Skidmore and the service provider have skin in the game, so it behooves both of us to work very closely to find additional savings where we can because of the gain share agreement. So that takes us over to monthly reporting. If you can measure it, you can improve it. You can see here that when we started measuring this back in May 13, we've got a really nice trend line on our zero sort recycling and a big decrease on the trash side. You can see that on the August 13, there was a big spike in trash versus August of this year, significant increase in zero sort. So one of the reports that we get on a monthly basis, this is the next slide. Okay, this is a great report that gets communicated around the campus to senior leadership, to campus groups, and it really shows in a very easy way what are we doing, where are we going, and what are the results. This shows the metric tons of greenhouse gas reduction. We use the US EPA WARM method and equivalent. One of the things that we had when we were when we started this out was inconsistent branding. And if you could go to the next slide, please. So with the help of Casella, they have an in-house design team. We were able to come up with some consistent branding for our campus for recycling and landfill. These have been deployed around the campus, and pretty much where there's a waste bin, there's also a recycling bin. That brings me to the next slide, which I'd like to talk a little bit about some additional resources. If you search for WasteWise Resource Management in your internet browser, it'll bring up the EPA website, and there is a complete program there that talks about resource management and you know, what to do, who to do it with, how to do it. It'll run you through how to put together a bid package, how to review numbers, how to set up a baseline. It's a great resource that that we've used in order to help us put this resource management program together. So that brings me to the last slide in closing. We got a great testimonial from Rachel Willis, the sustainability coordinator. But you know, this is a good testament from the quarterly meetings and conference calls to the overall support that we've received, even including our Casella sales rep sorting trash. It's been a very pleasant process. So it goes above and beyond what the typical back of shop vendor customer relationship, more into a true sustainability partnership. And I'll be happy to answer questions in the question session. Thank you, Liza.
Thank you, Andy, and a big thank you to each of our presenters for joining us today to share your expertise and the challenges and successes that you've each undergone at your respective institutions. Before we open it up for questions and answers, I want to just provide a quick recap on what was covered today and the important drivers to successfully implementing resource management practices. One, it is critical that we redefine the way that we think about and manage materials generated on campus, both by reorienting the asset infrastructure that we have on campus to be geared toward driving out waste and cost while maximizing the value of our resources, and by breaking down the traditional management of contracts. Two, strategic partnerships and aligned incentives are key. All of our presenters today spoke heavily about the importance of partnerships and the power of partnerships, both internal partnerships and external partnerships with vendors and suppliers, and how integral they are to effectively implementing resource management practices. The last takeaway, and probably the hardest to implement, is the notion of supply chain orientation. And this aspect is critical, and it's imperative that we focus on materials from the point of generation all the way through to ultimate disposal, and really understanding everything that happens in between, from the behavior of the users of the system to stakeholder engagement to supplier management. So with that, I'd like to open it up for Q&A. Again, if you have any questions and you have not already done so, please type your question into the message box. And we have just about 15 minutes left, which is great, to answer any questions that you have. So the first question looks like this one's for Spring. Spring, Cornell has a strong supplier management program. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that program entails?
Sure. Our supply management program, it formally evaluates our suppliers using a scorecard and recognition program. It was initially there to evaluate the selected preferred suppliers in 5 categories for product and service quality, pricing, order fulfillment, customer satisfaction, and social responsibility. Last year, it was expanded to include customer satisfaction surveys, corrective action plans, and an annual narrative from the suppliers. They provide quality reports to support their performance results, which our procurement services department reviews. We then grant awards at 2 levels, a top recognition and an honorable mention. And out of 10,000 vendors that currently serve campus, we pick about 22 to participate. And I will let you know that Casella has been participating in the scorecard program since it started, and they have achieved top recognition every year.
Thank you, Frank. The next question we have is for Erica. The question is, how have students been engaged with resource management and waste diversion changes on campus?
Sure. Well, some of these initiatives were initially student-driven. You know, maybe the students have come up with the ideas, like the reusable takeout containers. So they come up with the ideas, but then it's usually the staff and the administrators who have to figure out the details of how to make it really work. And then I do work a lot with students in class settings. We have a lot of service learning classes at UVM. So that's my preferred way. If we work with a professor on a specific project, there's usually more accountability on the part of the students, and they get a much deeper understanding of complex issues. It's not just a spontaneous random volunteer, but it's actually more of a systematic semester-long project. And in fact, with the reusable takeout program, there was an environmental studies class that studied it for a full semester. They used the containers, they tested the transaction of, you know, how to make the exchange with the dirty container, with the clean container. So it was vetted for a full semester by a class, and then they did a report on that.
Great,
and then,
thank you.
Yeah.
Did you have another comment?
No, just on the fun side, I also happen to be the club advisor for the Student Environmental Club, so I do get to have fun with them on occasion, too.
Great, thank you. The next question we have is for Andy. The question is, is the gain for Casella to support the diversion of waste from landfill captured in the resale of the value of recyclables?
Liza, could you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. So is the gain for Casella to support the diversion of waste from landfill captured by the resale of the value of the recyclables? So is that the value for investing in programs like this?
Okay, so the value for investing in the program, you know, the zero sort recycling has obviously you know, a different value and a different cost structure from municipal solid waste. So the value for us as the program manager is that we identified what the spends were for MSW, what the spends were for recycling, and looked at a way of reducing or just changing the mix. So more recycling, less MSW with gain share is really what's pushing the increased recycling at the company. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
I think that covers it. The next question we have is for Spring. Spring, if I can only focus on one area of resource management on campus, where should the starting point be?
Well, I can tell you right now, my focus is swinging towards procurement. And, and as Erica explained before, those of us who work in waste management typically don't have a lot of influence on the purchasing that goes on, but that's where my focus is swinging to, and swinging to how to work more with the procurement department and look and review at policy that would impact purchasing decisions. What we get rid of in the end is what we purchased, and so whether it be furniture or paper, that's where my vision is going.
So now you have a great relationship with your procurement team, and you interact with them regularly. Do you have any suggestions for folks who may have a different relationship with their procurement teams? Because often they're very different departments that tend to not interact in the way that Cornell's departments interact.
Well, I think that's a little tricky, because not only with different procurement teams, but then procuring structures. So we have an overarching procurement department that manages the contracts for the university and does all the work to make sure that our vendors have all the insurances and all that information. And they push out education information and have a central online procuring system. Other colleges, it may not be as centralized, or it may be even more centralized, where there's more limitations on exactly what's available. So I think the first step is really to identify how does the procurement system work and who really are the decision makers. And I've found it's been really great to have some campus-wide teams where you get together with the users, the buyers, even the vendors, to really brainstorm improvements. But first you have to really identify who are the ones with the authority that are really doing the buying. It may not be your procurement department. It may really be driven by the end user, at which point they may be the best people to be talking to.
Thanks, Spring. The next question we have is for Erica. As we make progress towards zero waste, our overall generation will go down. For example, reusable food containers are replaced by compostable service litter, which will reduce our overall compost tonnage. How do you keep morale high while doing actions that will reduce your recycling and compost rates and tonnage?
How do we keep morale high? I'm not
So this goes to your waste less, right? I mean, ultimately what we want to do is waste less, as you pointed out in your presentation. So as we waste less by way of different programs, how do we keep the morale high, because there's this notion that we're not recycling or composting as much?
Right. Yeah, that is sort of the paradox, because you can see a pile of recyclables and you can see food waste, organics, and it's easy to measure because it's there. So then it's, how do you measure something that's not there? So I think sometimes it's just anecdotally sharing, you know, by eliminating, I don't know, 5 years ago, by eliminating the campus, the printed telephone directory on campus, because we used to print up our own phone book on campus. By eliminating that, we've reduced 29 tons of paper or phone book directories. So you can kind of count that the first year you do it, because it's 29 tons that's not in our waste stream, that was in our waste stream last year, but you can't keep counting it. So I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say there's a morale issue, because people just kind of get that reducing waste, having less stuff to deal with is better than having a big pile of recyclables. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Erica. We have time for one more question, and this one's going to go to Andy. Andy, in your experience, what is the best way to create or implement a performance-based contract if the company or service provider that you have has never really created one before, or doesn't have the same services or methods as Casella or your partner?
Okay, so the best way to create a resource management program where the current provider is not necessarily strong on that. Okay, so I think the best way, some of the steps that need to happen before any resource management agreements are looked at is number one is anybody looking at that needs to have buy-in from senior leadership. You know, it's critical that this really is a top-down initiative because you're working with many different departments, many different procurement people. So if we have a top-down methodology from senior leadership down, that certainly is one thing to really help. The next thing is to identify every single stakeholder that's within the organization that generates trash and recycling that is part of the team. And then what I would honestly do, if the current provider does not have the bandwidth for a resource management program, take a look at the WasteWise information on the EPA website. It does give, there's a lot of good information there that can help people go through the whole resource management methodologies. You know, and lastly, we obviously can be a resource for you as well.
Thank you, Andy. We are approaching the end of the presentation today, and I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us for the webinar, and I hope you got some good key takeaways that you can start to think about and noodle on as to how you can implement some of these tactics on your individual campuses. If you have any further questions about the material that was presented today or about the services that Greener U offers, please reach out to Scott or David. Their information is listed here on this slide. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, please follow Greener U on Twitter and or LinkedIn to know when the webinar content is posted online. This will likely happen within a week. Thank you again, and best of luck.